This story was preserved in fragments, whispered in the shadows of ancient libraries, hidden from eyes that were not meant to see. It was copied carefully by scribes, discussed quietly by rabbis, and recorded in texts that few ever held. Centuries later, those same writings were labeled dangerous and quietly removed from view. Not because they denied God, but because they revealed something too profound, something too disruptive to human understanding, something that challenged the foundations of belief itself. These texts speak of beings called the Watchers, angels who once walked among humanity, and of actions that shook the world long before the flood. They speak of forbidden knowledge, of choices that defied divine law, and of consequences that rippled across time and history. Early teachers of faith feared these stories. They feared the clarity of what was written, the way it illuminated truths they were not ready to confront. The knowledge contained here was silenced not for its heresy, but for its power. Power to change how people understood the heavens, the earth, and the events that led to the destruction of a world. Some say these stories are myths. Others know that the fragments that survived are only a glimpse of a far greater truth, one that has been deliberately hidden. Some stories are not meant to comfort. Some stories are meant to reveal, to awaken, to disturb, to demand that we look, even when what we see unsettles the mind and challenges the soul. Before we take the first step into this forbidden world, tell me, what part of the world are you watching from? What most explanations delay, what most teachers quietly avoid, is the truth recorded in fragments so fragile that their very existence is a miracle. The Book of Enoch, a text older than most of the scrolls preserved in libraries today, makes a claim that shatters assumptions and unsettles the mind. It tells us that angels, beings of light, of divine will, once descended from heaven to dwell among humanity. And among them, some chose to break the laws of God, not in myth, not in metaphor, but in deliberate, conscious action. They saw the world of mortals and turned from obedience, drawn by curiosity, desire, or a will that exceeded the limits set before them. In doing so, they defied the order of the heavens and brought into being a new and terrifying presence upon the earth, the Nephilim, giants, warriors, beings of great strength and darkness who walked the earth before the flood, whose existence blurred the boundary between the divine and the mortal. This is not a story of imagination. Archaeologists and historians of ancient Judaism note that fragments of these texts, once preserved in Aramaic and Ge'ez, circulated widely among the people of the Second Temple period. These texts were considered dangerous because they exposed the vulnerability of creation itself, revealing that rebellion could reach even those who were thought to be perfect, beings created in the presence of God. And yet, what is most unsettling is not the act alone, but the consequences. Their choices set in motion events that touched every life on earth. The Nephilim, the corruption, the violence, all became a chain that led to the flood, to a judgment that would wash the world clean. These are not legends told for wonder. They are fragments of history, warnings written for a world that was on the edge of chaos, fragments preserved to remind us that even the highest beings are capable of transgression. And this is only the beginning of the forbidden story. Most viewers leave before the truth becomes uncomfortable. If you are still here, subscribe. This journey is not for everyone. To understand why this story was considered so dangerous, we must leave our world behind and step into theirs, a world where the very fabric of belief shaped life, law, and survival. A world in which divine law was absolute, written not on paper alone, but on the hearts of those who lived in obedience to it. In that time, knowledge was scarce. Scrolls were precious, every word copied by hand, every teaching guarded by those who held authority over faith and law. This was the age of the Second Temple, roughly the 3rd to 2nd century before the Common Era. Priests, scribes, and elders were the keepers of understanding, and their judgment could decide the fate of a community. A misinterpreted word, a forbidden teaching, could bring exile, shame, or worse. It was within this strict, fragile structure that the story of the Watchers emerged, not as a legend to entertain, but as a warning, a record meant to reveal the consequences of crossing boundaries that no mortal or angel should ever cross. The Watchers were not imagined figures. They were described in ways that suggested an intimate knowledge of both heaven and earth. The texts preserved their names, their lineage, their actions. The message was clear: defiance, even among the divine, had tangible consequences. The consequences did not end in some far-off realm. They touched the earth itself. They changed the course of human history, brought violence, corruption, and a reckoning that would culminate in the flood. These stories were dangerous because they asked questions that the authorities of the time could not allow to be asked aloud. If people believed that angels could fall, that divine beings could be corrupted, then the entire framework of obedience, of human understanding of God's order, was threatened. And yet, even within the silence, fragments survived. The scribes who preserved them may have feared the consequences, yet they also recognized the truth contained in these words, a truth too important to erase entirely. What if the forbidden knowledge they hid was closer to the truth than we dare imagine? What if, in the shadows of their libraries, the reality of the Watchers awaited those willing to see? The story is not legend. It is a caution. It is a revelation. And it waits for those who are ready to follow its quiet, unsettling path. At the heart of these ancient texts lies a question that early believers wrestled with in silence, a question that unsettled the foundations of faith and lingered like a shadow over every interpretation of history. Did angels actually fall from heaven? It is a question that is easy to dismiss, yet impossible to ignore when the words of the Book of Enoch are read carefully. They speak of beings called the Watchers, celestial in nature, whose purpose was to guide, to observe, to uphold the order of creation. And yet, some of them turned from their divine charge. They descended to the earth, not merely as observers, but as participants, as agents of change, as beings whose choices would ripple across the lives of every human they encountered. If the answer to this question is yes, then the world of God before the flood was not as orderly as it appears in familiar scripture. The heavens, thought to be perfect and inviolate, were touched by rebellion. The earth, thought to be under human stewardship alone, was instead intertwined with forces beyond comprehension. And if this is true, then the flood, the great cleansing of humanity, may have been not only a response to the corruption of humankind, but also a reckoning for a celestial disobedience that had fractured creation itself. Consider the implications: beings of unimaginable power, with wisdom far beyond our own, choosing to break the boundaries set by their Creator. What does this reveal about the nature of obedience, about free will, about the fragile line between order and chaos? Early believers feared this question because it demanded a level of understanding that could not be contained. To confront it fully is to acknowledge that the story of humanity is inseparable from the story of the angels, that before the flood, heaven and earth were entangled in a drama that exceeded anything we can imagine today. And yet, the texts do not give a clear answer. They do not tell us exactly how the rebellion unfolded, nor do they explain the full extent of its consequences. The question is left suspended, haunting every line, every fragment that survives. It is a question meant to be carried, pondered, felt in the quiet of contemplation, before the mind seeks the comfort of certainty. What if the very beings we assume are untouchable, perfect, and eternal could choose differently? What if the destruction that reshaped the world was influenced not only by human failure, but by the choices of those who once walked the heavens? The answer remains hidden, waiting. And it is here, in this tension, that the story begins to unfold. And the passage is stark, unyielding, as if etched in fire rather than ink. And the angels who transgressed the commandment of the Lord, who joined themselves with women, brought forth giants on the earth, whose deeds corrupted all creation. Read plainly, it sounds almost like a story meant for children's awe. Angels broke a rule. Giants were born. But to the people who first read these words, it was far from harmless. In the ancient understanding, this was literal. Beings born of heaven and earth walked among men, creatures whose strength and knowledge exceeded human comprehension. They were not myth, not allegory. Their existence revealed a rebellion that reached across realms. Heaven itself had been touched by defiance, and the consequences spilled into the world of mortals. These were beings of divine origin, yet they acted with human desire, human impulse, human defiance. And it was terrifying. The fear was not of myths, but of reality. The knowledge that the earth could be corrupted not only by human sin, but by beings who had once dwelled in the presence of God. The text warns us that their actions brought chaos and violence to all creation, and eventually, that corruption required a reckoning beyond human comprehension, a cleansing flood that would wipe the slate of the world clean. The passage demanded vigilance, secrecy, and fear, because understanding it fully meant confronting the vulnerability of creation itself. If angels could fall, if the heavenly order could be broken, then what of the order of the earth? What of the future of humankind under such forces? Many would read these words and turn away. Many would stop seeking the truth, because clarity comes with a weight too great for most to bear. The story here is not comforting. It is an awakening. It is a mirror showing how close the divine and mortal realms can collide, and how fragile that boundary truly is. Many leave here, because understanding demands courage. But for those who stay, the path deepens. The story continues, and the truth waits, patient and unyielding, for those willing to follow it. When these texts first circulated, they did not pass unnoticed. Scholars and teachers read them with trembling hands and minds weighed by both awe and fear. Some accepted the warnings quietly, guarding the knowledge in whispered teachings, careful to preserve its truth without inviting the wrath of authority. They understood that the story of the Watchers was not mere legend. It carried a reality too dangerous for open discussion, a truth that could unravel what humans had long taken for granted about the heavens. Others could not contain their alarm. They condemned the texts publicly, denouncing them as heresy, as dangerous curiosities meant to lead the faithful astray. To speak these truths aloud was to challenge centuries of established order, to reveal that even beings of divine origin could transgress, and that the consequences of such transgression reached far beyond what mortals could comprehend. A powerful few, however, chose a different path. They did not speak, nor openly accept, nor openly reject. They distanced themselves entirely, leaving the texts to fade into shadow, not because the story lacked meaning, but because the implications were too vast, too threatening. To admit fully that divine beings could corrupt creation was to acknowledge that no institution, no law, no hierarchy of human or spiritual governance was ever truly secure. The controversy did not simply fracture belief. It introduced a quiet tension, a persistent unease that lingered long after the initial readings. To engage with the story of the Watchers was to confront the possibility that creation itself was fragile, that even the divine could fall, and that humanity existed in a world shaped by forces beyond understanding, forces whose rebellion could ripple across generations. It is here that the narrative pivots, into the forbidden, into the unseen, into the parts that were deliberately left in shadow. Because to see fully what the Watchers did, and what their transgression unleashed, is to step into a truth that many believed should remain hidden. And yet, here it waits, patient and unwavering, for those who dare to follow its quiet, unsettling path. The texts were not destroyed. They were not lost to time or to the deliberate hands that sought to silence them. They were hidden, carefully, deliberately, preserved in corners of monasteries, in the margins of scrolls, in languages and scripts that few could read. For centuries, their voices were muted, their warnings and revelations folded into secrecy, quietly waiting for the world to be ready, or for those brave enough to find them. And then, centuries later, fragments of the Book of Enoch began to resurface. Aramaic scripts, ancient translations, texts preserved in Gizi, pieces that had survived the sweep of time and the erasure of human authority, emerged in collections, in libraries, in the hands of scholars and explorers who were unaware of the weight of what they held. These fragments carried the echoes of a story that had been silenced, but never forgotten. As they reappeared, questions that had once been forbidden, that had been whispered only in the shadows, could no longer be ignored. The same questions that had unsettled priests and rabbis now demanded attention from a new generation. Could angels truly fall? Could beings of divine origin act with defiance? Could the corruption of heaven have reached the earth in ways that changed the course of history itself? The rediscovery of these texts did not provide answers in a comforting form. Instead, it reopened the tension, the awe, the fear that had always accompanied their message. They revealed that knowledge had never been destroyed, it had only been concealed, waiting for those willing to look beyond the veil. And here lies the expectation that is reversed. What was once considered lost, what was thought to be forbidden forever, was never gone. It was waiting to remind us that the boundaries of heaven and earth, of obedience and rebellion, are far closer than we imagine. That even the most sacred truths, if hidden too long, can emerge to demand understanding, to demand reflection, to demand that we recognize the fragile balance of creation itself. These fragments, fragile yet unyielding, speak still, not in loud proclamations, but in quiet insistence, urging those who listen to see the world as it truly was before the flood, to see the Watchers and the Nephilim, and to confront the profound consequences of rebellion that reached from heaven to earth. The story speaks not in simple narrative, but in symbols, echoes of meaning layered deep within the words, waiting for those who can see beyond the surface. The first symbol is the Watchers. These were angels tasked with observing creation, with guiding humanity, with maintaining the order of heaven and earth. Yet their story reveals a quiet, terrifying truth. Even beings of divine origin, even those closest to God, can rebel. Their rebellion is not a metaphor. It is a warning. It is a sign that no creature, however exalted, is immune to desire, to choice, to defiance. The Watchers teach us that vigilance, understanding, and reverence are never passive. They demand attention, reflection, and humility. The second symbol is the Nephilim, giants born of union between angel and human. They are the tangible consequence of that rebellion. Their existence bridges the mortal and the divine, the earthly and the celestial. The Nephilim are more than creatures of strength or legend. They are proof that human history has been influenced by forces beyond comprehension, by hands that should not have touched the world of men. Every conflict, every upheaval recorded in the ancient texts hints at the shadow of their presence, at the way divine interference reshaped the course of humanity. And the third symbol is the flood, a great cleansing, a divine reset of a corrupted world. It is easy to think of the flood as punishment solely for human wickedness, but the texts suggest it was also a response to the fracture between heaven and earth. The rebellion of angels, the corruption sown by beings of power, contributed to a chain of events that forced the Creator to intervene in a way visible to all. The flood embodies the weight of choices, celestial and human alike, and reminds us that order can be disrupted by even a single transgression of the divine. These symbols are not meant to comfort. They are meant to illuminate. They are meant to confront us with the truth that the universe, and the history we inherit, is fragile, interconnected, and often shaped by forces we cannot fully control or comprehend. To understand them is to understand the precarious balance of creation itself, and to feel the responsibility that comes with knowledge. Hearing the truth without following it is how understanding dies. Subscribe, don't stop halfway. Scholars and theologians have wrestled with these texts for centuries, their minds circling the same question from different angles, each interpretation carrying weight, each leaving an echo of uncertainty. The first interpretation takes the words at their face, literal fallen angels, beings of heaven who chose defiance, descended to the earth, and brought forth the Nephilim. This reading explains the existence of giants, the violence that escalated across the land, and ultimately, the flood as a direct response from God to a corruption that was both celestial and human. Yet it threatens the traditional view that humanity alone bore the weight of sin. If divine beings could rebel, then the moral universe is more complex than the simple distinction of right and wrong, heaven and earth. The implications are vast. Obedience is no longer a guarantee of protection. Creation itself is fragile. The second interpretation suggests a metaphorical fall. Perhaps the angels are symbols, embodiments of moral corruption and hubris, warning against pride, lust, and the erosion of divine law. This reading preserves the moral lesson but threatens historical literalism. If the giants are not real, if the flood is not tied to celestial rebellion, then the narrative is not history but allegory, and the tangible consequences we imagine, the upheavals, the violence, the tangible influence of the Nephilim, become a story of moral imagination rather than actual events. Even so, the weight of the warning remains, though its force is shifted from reality into metaphor. The third interpretation looks beyond both history and metaphor, suggesting the texts themselves are fragments of lost ancient knowledge. The Book of Enoch, along with other hidden writings, may have preserved insights about the cosmos, about spiritual hierarchies, and about the ways the divine interacts with the mortal world, knowledge that was deliberately concealed because it threatened institutional authority. This reading explains why the texts were hidden, why they were labeled dangerous, why centuries of silence followed. But it also challenges the institutions that claimed guardianship over faith, suggesting that much of what has been taught may have been filtered to preserve control rather than to illuminate truth. Each interpretation carries a cost. Each demands a confrontation with uncertainty, with the uncomfortable possibility that the world is not as it has been presented. And the texts themselves give no definitive answer. They leave us suspended in a space of awe and fear, wonder and dread, inviting us to wrestle with the questions they pose, rather than offering the comfort of certainty. The answer is withheld, lingering between the lines, between heaven and earth, between obedience and rebellion. It waits for those willing to seek it, for those willing to bear the weight of knowing. This mystery did not vanish with the centuries. It evolved quietly, slipping into the margins of Scripture, shaping interpretations, and lingering in the questions that were whispered but never fully asked. It persists wherever authority cautions curiosity, wherever understanding is restrained by tradition, and wherever the weight of knowledge threatens the structures humans erect to contain it. Even today, its presence is felt in the way faith is taught and received. What you believe may be incomplete. The stories preserved in fragments, the warnings hidden in texts long buried, suggest that the truths we hold are only pieces of a larger, more complex reality. Faith is no longer a matter of simple obedience, of following rules and reciting prayers. It is a living, questioning, fragile endeavor, where understanding demands more than compliance. It demands courage, humility, and the willingness to face truths that unsettle the mind and soul. Obedience alone does not guarantee clarity or safety. The angels of old, the Watchers, were obedient no longer, yet their rebellion shaped the world in ways humanity could neither predict nor fully comprehend. The lesson is clear: following rules is not enough. To truly see, to truly understand, one must look beyond what is comfortable, beyond what is sanctioned, and beyond what is safe. And inquiry, the simple act of asking, can lead to revelations that challenge everything. Even the most sacred assumptions may falter under the light of scrutiny. To ask the right question is to invite the weight of revelation, to confront the possibility that the world is far more intricate, far more intertwined with divine and fallen forces than we ever imagined. Truth does not vanish because it is unknown. It endures quietly, waiting. What disappears is our willingness to follow it, to bear the burden it carries, to remain awake in the presence of its subtle, persistent light. Truth does not disappear. People just stop following it. Why was this hidden? The answer is not simple. It was not concealed because it was false, nor because it contradicted the sacred. It was hidden because the knowledge it contained threatened everything that had been constructed to guide, to govern, and to protect the faithful. Early believers understood that if the story of angelic rebellion were known, if the full weight of the Watchers' descent, the Nephilim, and the corruption of creation was understood, then authority itself, human and spiritual, could be questioned, and obedience could no longer be guaranteed by fear or tradition alone. This was never about forbidden knowledge. It was about control. It was about the fragility of belief when confronted with truths that surpass comfort and convenience. When believers began to grasp the possibility that angels, beings of light and divine intention, could fall, that they could defy the Creator and bring consequences that touched the mortal world, the structures built to maintain order trembled. The story demanded a level of understanding that institutions could neither manage nor contain. And so it was hidden, folded into secrecy, whispered in shadows, preserved in fragments. The silence was deliberate, a protective measure for those in authority, but also a caution for those who sought to know too much. To see fully what the text revealed was to step into a tension between faith and knowledge, obedience and understanding, certainty and wonder. Yet the story could not remain buried forever. Even in fragments, it persisted, carrying the memory of rebellion, the warning of consequences, the reminder that belief, when fully informed, resists control. It is here that the cycle begins again. The fragments awaken curiosity. the questions resurface, and those who are willing to follow the trail of revelation begin to see that the world, both visible and unseen, has always been shaped by choices far beyond human comprehension. This is the reason for the concealment. Not to erase history, not to deny the sacred, but to shield the mind from truths too vast, too destabilizing, and yet too necessary to ignore. When belief becomes too informed, it cannot be managed. It must be confronted. And in that confrontation, the story of the Watchers continues to unfold, patient, unyielding, sacred. If this is true, if angels truly fell, if the Watchers walked among men, if the Nephilim once roamed the earth, then the implications ripple far beyond the passages we have already examined. Texts that once seemed benign, ordinary, or purely moral take on a weight they were never meant to carry in our modern understanding. A line about giants, a reference to sons of God, or the mighty ones, a fleeting mention of violence or corruption, all these fragments must be seen through a different lens, a lens that recognizes the collision of divine and human realms. History itself, the pre-flood world, becomes a landscape shaped not only by human action, but by the intervention of forces beyond comprehension. The corruption, the violence, the rise of extraordinary beings, none of it was merely symbolic. Every choice made by these fallen beings, every transgression, altered the trajectory of creation. And the flood, the cataclysm that cleansed the earth, was not merely a response to human sin. It was the inevitable consequence of a universe in which heaven itself had been breached, where obedience had faltered, and where power walked among mortals with intentions that could not be contained. This realization demands that we return to other passages, that we read the familiar with eyes that have been opened, that we allow ourselves to question what we were told was complete. The genealogies, the lists of mighty men, the fragments of early scripture, they begin to hum with new meaning. The world, once assumed orderly, is now revealed as a tapestry woven with both human and celestial threads, fragile and intricate. And yet, this expansion of understanding is unsettling. It is heavier than the story itself because it asks us to reconsider everything we believed about creation, morality, and divine justice. If angels could fall, if the boundaries of heaven and earth were ever crossed, then nothing in the pre-flood world can be taken at face value. Every narrative, every teaching, every simple account of history is now layered with possibilities that demand attention, contemplation, and courage. Expectation is reversed. What once seemed safe, contained, and understandable is revealed as a threshold. It is a threshold into knowledge that illuminates and unsettles simultaneously, a revelation that the story of the Watchers was only the beginning. The threads of divine intervention, rebellion, and consequence run deeper than we had dared to follow. And to pull on them is to open a history both sacred and perilous, a history that still waits, patient, in the shadows of texts long hidden. Once you see this, everything familiar shifts. Even passages you thought you knew, even the words you have read countless times, no longer resonate with the same innocence. The genealogies, the tales of early generations, the stories of divine judgment, they hum with an undercurrent of reality previously hidden. Comfort dissolves. Certainty fractures. What you believed was stable, orderly, and safe is revealed to have been shaped by forces both celestial and uncontainable. The Watchers are no longer distant, abstract figures cast in the realm of legend. They are actors in history, their presence woven into the very fabric of the pre-flood world. Their choices, their transgressions, their descent from heaven altered the trajectory of humanity itself. Every act of defiance, every union with mortal beings, every lesson ignored or transgressed, created ripples that the flood itself could barely contain. History, once assumed to belong solely to humans, becomes a shared domain with the divine, the fallen, the extraordinary. And in recognizing this, we confront a truth that is at once terrifying and sacred. Creation has always been fragile, shaped by decisions that were never meant to be ours to witness fully, yet which now demand our contemplation. The story closes no doors. It offers no tidy resolutions. The Watchers' rebellion, the Nephilim, the flood, all of it lingers in the mind like a quiet tremor, a persistent awareness that the world, the heavens, and even our understanding of morality were never as separate, as simple, or as controlled as we once imagined. This is the unsettling close, the recognition that what was hidden is not just history, but a living question, that the boundaries between heaven and earth are permeable, and that knowledge carries a weight far heavier than comfort can bear. Once seen, once understood, the world will never feel the same. The Watchers are no longer myths. They are a force, subtle and eternal, whose echoes remain in every corner of creation, waiting for those who are willing to see. This mystery does not stand alone. The story of the Watchers, of angels who fell, and of giants who walk the earth is only one thread in a tapestry that stretches across texts, across time, across shadows that were never meant to be fully seen. There are other writings, fragments, scrolls, and accounts that speak in echoes of the same events, that hint at forces at work in the world before the flood, forces that shaped human history in ways most have forgotten or never knew. One such text survives only in pieces, whispered of in scholarly circles, rarely examined, rarely understood. Its words carry a resonance that deepens the unease of the Watcher's tale, connecting the rebellion of heaven to the corruption of earth, to knowledge that was deliberately concealed, and to questions that remain unresolved even today. To follow that thread is to step further into revelation, into truths that unsettle the mind and stir the soul. It is a journey into the hidden architecture of creation, where the boundaries of divine intention, human choice, and cosmic consequence converge. And it is here, at the edge of understanding, that the story becomes far more unsettling than the fragments we have already uncovered, because it suggests a continuity, a hidden design, a shadow history that challenges everything assumed about obedience, power, and the nature of the divine. For those who would follow, the path is not closed. The texts wait patiently, the questions linger, and the echoes of the Watchers call softly, urging us to see beyond the veil, to honor the weight of knowledge, and to recognize that what was hidden has always been more than story. It has been revelation, waiting to awaken those who are ready to listen.